I'd like to call the Wednesday, April 12th, 2023 Community and Economic Development Committee meeting to order. Julie, could I have a roll call, please?
Chair Edson.
Here.
Vice Chair Shields.
Here.
Councilmember Lovell.
Here.
Councilmember Pryor.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Arth.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Chair,
Councilmember Shields.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Shields and a second by Councilmember Lovell to approve the agenda. Could I have a roll call, please?
Vice Chair Shields.
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell.
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Chair Edson.
Aye. Thank you. Do we have any public comments tonight? Okay, great. Now we'll move on to business. The approval of the March 8th, 2023 Community and Economic Development Action Letter. Can I have a motion for approval, please?
Chair,
Councilmember Shields.
move to approve the March 8th action letter. Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Shields and a second by Councilmember Pryor to approve the action letter from March 8th. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Lovell.
Did you say roll call?
Roll call vote.
Okay. Aye.
Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Chair Edson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Shields.
Aye.
Thank you. And for our first presentation of the evening, Mr. Josh Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman Edson, members of the CEDC. We wanted to start off the agenda tonight with a discussion on infill policy. The minor plat ordinance is really, I'll call it a cleanup that has somewhat to do with infill, but the real infill topic, I think, tonight is our ADU ordinance. So I wanted to set the table a little bit with that. I do have a PowerPoint with some pretty pictures, but before we get into that, I wanted to kind of go on a 2 to 3 minute spiel before we start that. To me, when I think of infill, the basic concept with that is we're allowing, maybe a little more housing, possibly some commercial, depending on the context, in an area where we've already got existing development and by extension, probably existing resources. So, and that could apply with ADUs as well. There's already water and sewer in the area. There's already obviously electrical service, gas, all that for possible hookup. It's not a greenfield development where all that has to be added. So to me, that's what I think of when I think of infill. And the reason we're coming to you for a discussion on policy is what we don't want to do is bombard the committee with a bunch of ordinances that you may or may not want, or do work that's not going to contribute to the goal you're after. We want to do meaningful work that the council directs us to do through policy. So one area I think we could talk about, this is just a block in our downtown, and I don't want to imply that infill would just be in our downtown by any stretch of the imagination. But you can see these are some newer homes that have been built in the last few years. That was done through a division of land, basically through a public hearing process they came through, and then they minor platted those 3 lots. Those are some newer homes, and then when you look at the rest of the block, though, these are older homes. I believe most of them built in the 1930s, and then obviously there's a large area here that could be developed with 1 or 2 lots. So that's one version of infill right there. Is this part of town has a lot of existing resources going for it. The stormwater, it's still in ditches there, so there are some things lacking. But just one example to put up there. I can tell that I think you want to say something, so I'll stop.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know exactly where this is. Because when I think of infill, I'm like, this would not come to mind.
Sure.
So what makes this infill, I guess is what I'm asking.
So in my mind, what makes this infill is that there was already existing city services to this, city streets that didn't have to be constructed. And so we were able to take a piece of land and chop it up into smaller parts.
Okay.
And same thing, if you look at that northwest quadrant of that block, there's obviously some opportunity there. And it could come in a variety of flavors, you know, maybe you keep some of those homes, maybe you clear them, you get ownership of the whole thing and you clear them. I know that there has been work by developers in the downtown, local people, where it's like, hey, we know these homes are up for sale and they're trying to assemble land to do little projects like this.
Okay.
So yeah, this is just one kind of flavor of this I wanted to bring up and talk through so that we could, I think, have a discussion tonight. Now, I'm going to show you some other images. These are from other cities, but just to get, I think, some discussion going.
Okay, thank you.
And please interrupt anytime. I think this is really healthy. So, reason I wanted to show you this image, it's obviously a little denser housing in this area, but they've self-parked it in some motor courts in the middle. So I know parking has been a concern of this committee with these infill projects.
Okay, I think he was referencing the parking, and I see what you're talking about now. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anybody else? We can revisit. I just wanted to kind of keep going here.
Councilmember Pryor? Do you-
So wouldn't something like this just add to the stormwater problem when you're doing this much asphalt?
I think something like this would have to mitigate its stormwater impacts, either on its own side or through off-site improvements. What we're not saying with this is, hey, just waive all your requirements. What we're saying is there an opportunity here to streamline part of the process, something like that? And that's why this policy needs to be crafted is if we're gonna let go of something, do we get a value add by getting some more units in an area of the city that we think makes sense? Does that help?
It does, but I also know that it doesn't always go as planned, because I've seen some of the new houses get built in downtown. They build them up, and then it causes stormwater issues for everyone around them. So ideally, it would, but I know it doesn't.
So I think an example, it's just north of that block I showed here. Each home had Ryan helped me out with the stormwater mitigation they did. It's a little pit.
Yeah, if I could jump in here real quick. So on that, so for these newer homes here that went through here, they had an infiltration basin put in back in the to handle the individual stormwater runoff from each individual lot. But the reason why that requirement was able to be put into place was through our preliminary development plan process through there. The situation that you were just speaking of, Councilmember Pryor, is really a result of somebody could come in and I'll just say lot number 8 there, for example, Hearns Addition. If you're looking at Hearns Addition, lot number 8 there, and I'm using this as an example because that house is gone now and now there's a much larger home there. Our current codes and regulation allow that to occur. Without having any additional stormwater or any additional infrastructure associated with that because of the way it was originally platted. Part of the infill policy would be to provide a mechanism to address the mitigation of those impacts, if that makes sense. So the difference between a greenfield or a planned development or one in is that we have regulations in place that are designed to require those items to be mitigated and addressed. In a redevelopment situation, if they're going like for like, if you will, or if it's already zoned, then that's a different scenario, and that's kind of what we're talking about with the infill. Now, there's a balance there as well that we want to try to create. We want to make sure that we're allowing as much to occur on the property as possible that the property owner would want to do and what they're trying to accomplish with their goals in mind, but also taking care of their impacts that they're having on everybody else.
Why isn't there anything in place right now? I mean, why is a developer just allowed to do that too?
Well, in this instance, the developer would have been the homeowner. associated with that. It's a single lot, single home, so if it's zoned for single family, the way that it is, then there's no regulation against that. It's just not on the books. Now, why would that be? Quite frankly, our codes are designed for greenfield development, and that's why we're here tonight discussing potentials for an infill policy or more of a redevelopment approach to certain areas.
Okay, I just feel like it's kind of all or nothing, like, I feel like there has to be some sort of compromise, like, compromise where we're not gonna have, I know that was just a picture that you were showing us, but compromise where it's not gonna be additions like that in downtown when there's so many infrastructure issues, and a compromise between houses right now can just build a single-family home, they can build it essentially higher than the other homes surrounding them, so all of their stormwater just drains off into the houses surrounding them, since there's obviously not codes protecting. There's got to be some sort of a compromise, I feel like, but
So, yeah, let's continue with the infill discussion, and then we can come back either afterwards or another discussion and talk about the stormwater and those concerns, okay? Is that okay?
Chair,
Is that fair?
Chair,
Yes.
if I may,
Yeah.
I want one point of clarification.
Sure.
There are codes in place, and you are not allowed to, I guess I'll use a term that we hear a lot, push all your water onto your neighbors or have it not go anywhere. But in this instance, where this would go would be the ditches in front, and it would be part of the capacity of what was originally designed for there. And times have changed significantly as far as the sophistication level of the design associated with infrastructure and the infrastructure requirements itself. Just when these streets were built, a design storm would have been lucky if it was what we call a 10-year design storm. They're much higher now, and so just there's a difference between existing infrastructure and the design requirements that were in place at the time that was constructed and the capacities that it was designed for and today. And so the question becomes who's responsible for upsizing that infrastructure, if you will, that was in place at that time.
So what I'm going to do based on that discussion is actually tie it to the minor plat thing that's next on the agenda. So right now, if you're in what we call a planned zone, RP1, RP2, most of the city has something P dash whatever. So most of the city is actually in planned zoning. So if you want to take a big lot you've got and just cut it in two and then sell that lot to somebody else and have them build a house, you have to go through the whole 90-day process. That's Planning Commission, City Council. So one infill policy you could do is say, hey, we direct staff to do all your stormwater requirements, your sewer, water, whatever, your sidewalk requirements on any plat or any minor plat that creates new lots. Now, what we've done tonight that's second on your agenda is said any public infrastructure, we're directing staff to require it on those minor plats. So that would be part of a policy is, hey, do all these, I'll say, stormwater, sewer, water, sidewalk requirements on these. And then that would be an administrative process that has the same outcome of cutting that lot in two. So this is, I think, what we need to talk through tonight a little bit, and that's gonna have us go and kind of craft ordinances to meet the demand of the committee.
Council member, are you okay? Okay, Mr. Johnson, thank you.
So what I'm taking away from this is mitigate impacts at an administrative level if more things go to an administrative level. So that does help. I was just going to show a few more pictures, but this one I don't care for architecturally speaking, but again, it does provide parking via what looks like to me to be a private alley. Again, I can't tell you how they mitigated or didn't mitigate stormwater in this instance. Now, these are pretty tall. They're 3 stories. They are articulated as different units, which I think is good, and there are offsets to make them look unique through a variety of materials and modulation there. And again, I think architecture could be important in this discussion.
Councilmember, go
Oh,
ahead.
do you have
Yeah, I
something?
was gonna-
Oh, Councilmember Lovell,
Go
sorry.
ahead if you want. Well, when you just mentioned architecture, I've always wondered, like, what could we do from an architecture standpoint?
We're at like a level 0.5 out of 10 right now, I think, as a city overall.
What does that mean?
It means to go to a 10, we would have to have like a separate design review process, something like that. So imagine what people go through for their rezones and the thing the council normally sees. We could have a special set of requirements for them that's above and beyond what we have now that like staff could administer, things like that. I don't want to add more time into our development process necessarily, but our architectural requirements in the UDO are like this long. And so I think we could develop more sophisticated architectural requirements.
I love that.
Yeah,
I think it just, we want to design a beautiful city. We don't want to hinder development or, drive cost up by it, but I think it's important that we have something there from a design perspective.
yeah, and one thing I will say, we've got, I think it's the T and Z zone downtown that really speaks more to compatibility with surrounding houses and things like that. So we've got kind of these separate zones that really get into more compatibility requirements, even at an administrative level, to what Councilmember Pryor is addressing. And so one thing I think we could say in our ordinance is, so you're building a home, like what do the homes look like around you? And then, are you trying to be compatible with those? So right now, we put things in a box. There's setbacks, there's height requirements. There's offsets, like how far you can go out with bay windows and chimneys and things like that. So basically what we do is we tell people, you can go in this box. Now think of the home that's on Lakeview, the concrete home. That's literally a box, right? I'm being a little silly here. And then there's another school of thought, and I will say most zoning codes, most kind of, I'll say land use law is that single family is kind of sacrosanct. Somebody wants to do something with their home other than HOA standards, a lot of times cities do back off and say, hey, that's your business.
Yeah, Councilmember Shield.
Thanks. So I guess I was wanting to sort of wait and hear the presentation, but I've heard, other council members chiming in. So I just want to say that this discussion isn't all one viewpoint, that I appreciate making sure that everything is built safely and that our infrastructure can handle any new development. But I really want to be careful about adding a lot more onerous steps, even for a minor, like for a single lot to have a home built on it. That I think the more that we do, the more difficult it is, the more costly it is, especially for just someone who's not a big developer, that doesn't have a big staff to do all this, someone who just wants to, build a deck on their house or, build an ADU that we're going to talk about later, or different things. That I don't want to make it so that the bar to do that is really high for someone who doesn't have, all this professional expertise. And I understand mitigating some of these effects that are going to impact the neighbors, but I really want to be careful that we're not, as we have this discussion, instead of making it easier to do infill in the city, making it a lot harder.
Yeah.
Because there's a balance, right? Yes, there are new draws on the existing infrastructure that may or may not be up to par, but if you don't build there, you're going to build somewhere else. And when you're talking about doing greenfield development, that means building infrastructure out into whole new areas. It's a lot more work to bring new water lines and new sewer lines and new roads. That there is a cost to not letting someone just build in an area that's already developed. So, and I just want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind, 'cause it's really easy to see the costs of letting someone put a new house somewhere, like, oh, we're going to have to, deal with the stormwater, deal with the parking and all that, but there's a cost to not letting them put it there too.
Yep.
So that, and then as far as design standards go, like, I don't think everything needs to always look the same. I think it's nice, sometimes neighborhoods can have variety and houses can look different, and I don't want to make it so that every time someone builds a new house, it needs to totally conform to what their neighbors are doing. I mean, we always talk about the downtown, and there's kind of a look and a feel down here, and we try to preserve that, but at the same time, there are totally different styles of houses all in the same blocks. There are big ones and little ones, and there's stone, and there's wood, and and that's okay. So I just want to say that my opinion is to try to have less onerous regulations, both for appearance and for what people need to do for infrastructure, especially for small developments. Thanks.
Let me ask a question along that line of thinking. One way we could go is that if somebody minor platted, that would be a purely administrative process. And I think, I'm trying to remember how far back this was, we had this discussion. Gosh, I don't even remember. We actually started down this line of kind of conceptual discussion. I think it was August, to be honest. And we were talking about, hey, do we make more things administrative was one of the discussion points. So just want to kind of bring things back a little bit.
And I do support that if it's a matter of streamlining the process for people, that it's not necessarily a different process, but it doesn't have as many steps to it.
Sure.
Thank you.
I purposely put some off-putting images in this. I just want you to know to stir discussion.
Well, and Josh, I'm sorry, what is T&Z zoning?
Neighborhood transition, help me.
Transitional neighborhood zone. So that the TNZ zone is an area that allows some commercial development to go into structures that look like single-family homes and things like that. So they kind of surround the downtown area a little bit, and you see some businesses and places that maybe used to be homes that were retrofitted towards business and things like that. So it's supposed to provide another transition from the central business another transition, not tradition, from the central business district down to the surrounding residential neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. And I know the Elevate is what, 4 stories?
I believe so, yes.
4 stories? Before that was built, I had always heard that there was some unspoken or spoken rule that nothing could be taller than City Hall in downtown. So
That, we would never draft anything like that. That borderline sounds illegal.
okay,
There's a height restriction though in there.
There's height restrictions in there, but through the public process, the PDP process, the council can say, you know what, we think a 5-story building is appropriate in this location, so.
okay. Councilmember Pryor, did you have something?
So this sounds kind of like I'm backtracking, but can you define exactly what infill means?
So infill is utilizing an existing part of the city to get more either dwelling units or more commercial, more development in an existing area. And efficiencies can be gained through more height, allowing more areas of a lot to be developed, things of that nature.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I just wanted to make sure I was on the exact same page. Okay, thank you.
No, I might. She's
Okay.
quite experienced, so.
Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to move on
Okay.
to the next slide.
All right. I actually think I might know where this one is. These are, I'd call them a contemporary architectural design. The shed roof you see there, just kind of the one slant. And again, not great architecture, but you can see how you could put some row homes in an area and, gain some efficiencies. These, I don't believe these have parking. I think it's all met through on-street parking.
Okay.
And I think I know how you guys feel about that, so. Well, you're the Lone Ranger on that one.
You gotta have a little diversity of opinion up here.
You could put an alley in the back. You could put an alley.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
I've heard they're trying to get away from using alleys now, aren't they? That's what I was told.
It's complicated.
Good answer.
Yeah, on-street parking is something that it's not safe for public safety, so it's something that me personally, I'm not willing to compromise on that. That just seems like a disaster, but.
With a wide enough road, we can do it on one or both sides. You can have enough room, Jim Eden will say this too.
I agree, but I don't know that there's a wide enough road in downtown, and
Oh, no, not there necessarily, but yeah.
Okay, do you have another slide?
Let me see here. This is very conceptual, as you can see, but what I like.
I think we're all gonna say no, Josh.
I actually toured one of the parts of this development that was built. This is in Oklahoma City, and it's an area called the Wheeler District. It's a place, if we wanted to go look at some kind of different types of development, what I want to call it, more new urbanism type development, that we should go tour that because it's down in Oklahoma City. So,
Do you see that the human cannot fit in those?
yeah,
No way.
you mean the draft? Remember that Zoolander thing? How are they going to learn to read if they
Yeah.
can't fit in the building? I think this is a good way to look at the benefits, if you will, of infill. You've got some massing diagrams there. Those are self-parked. Obviously, an architectural style we don't have here in Lee Summit, and maybe we never want. However, again, just here to spur some discussion. And you can see in that little pod of, I've got a mouse and everything. You can see in that pod of homes there, how the existing development pattern, you obviously get more units in that same footprint. So that would be kind of the concept there. Go.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking around going, I'm waiting.
I was actually looking up the Wheeler District on.
Oh, okay. So what do you do, because in all of these, what I think is missing is green space.
To me, if you're near a park, like you can walk to a park, that takes care of it. Now, if you've got a dog, that can be challenging. But say you're across or just down the street from Howard Park, well, you've got an area to recreate and go out to. I think that's the trade-off that we would need to make. And as you've heard our Parks Department say, we are after a standard of so many people per acre of park. So say we did that analysis and we're still at that ratio, then I think that could be justification on the open space requirements. Or we do say, hey, you do infill, but we still want to have X amount of open space per dwelling unit. Again, that's a decision, that's a policy decision.
Okay. Councilmember Shields, did you have something? I saw you out of the
I
corner of
just
my eye.
wanted to say that every time we have one of these discussions, I just always want to bring up, this is not about requiring someone to build this, but it's about giving them the choice to build it.
Right.
And not everybody needs a big yard or wants a big yard, and some people are happy to trade off the cost of having a big yard for the cost of having an extra bedroom or an office or whatever. So I like giving people more choices, but not forcing them to build one way.
No, that's fair. And, you know, if you go out to some degree, we've started seeing this, if you look at it, the townhouses at Streets of West Pryor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councilmember Pryor?
Thank you. Well, no, so that was going to be kind of my question is what's the difference between something like, well, not necessarily this, but like what you've shown and the development we approved that's going to back up to Shamrock Golf Course? Isn't that,
You're talking about the TriStar development?
was it TriStar? Yeah.
Well, that's a greenfield development. That would be the difference. That's not infilling where there's already existing development peppered. Most of that is open ground out there, I believe what you're talking about.
But as far as the way that it looks a lot like this. I know that's not infill, but it
Yeah.
just- doesn't it? If I'm remembering correctly, isn't
Yeah,
it?
there's some narrower lots and things like that. I believe there's even townhomes in that development. One thing I like to think of is Longview has those narrow, skinny lots. New Longview, excuse me. Not old Longview.
No, let's not.
So, yeah, I mean, I think those are examples of things kind of like this. And again, it's about that choice. Do you want to be on that narrow lot with that alley behind you? And some of them are built all together with almost no yard. But again, you can walk to areas out there pretty quickly, I think, and be in a park.
Well, and around downtown, I mean, there are areas, I passed by a street the other day I didn't even know existed, and there were like two sets of duplexes or townhomes that shared a driveway off of the street. And I was like, I didn't even know this was here, and there's another street down here that you drive in and it's almost all duplex townhomes.
Were you on
You know.
Lynn?
I don't know where it was. I was
Okay.
just driving around. I was stalking Councilmember Pryor is what I was doing, so I was over in that neck of the woods.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, you didn't know about that. But my point being is that not all of downtown right now is single-family homes,
Oh,
big
no, not at
lots.
all.
You know, there's a variety of housing already. Apartments, yeah. Yeah, so, okay. Anybody, Councilmember Lovell?
I was just gonna say, just seeing the different, I mean, if you're thinking about the ideas, like, if someone was wanting to come in and piece together, like, let's take one lot, these kinds of different styles of architecture allow someone to make it scale, like, for the price they would pay for that land, and then to get that density in it. I also think, if you go down, like, kind of Plaza area or Main Street area, you see a lot of stuff like this mixed in with old homes. I think it's really cool character, and it does give a lot of different housing options. So I think that's, the idea with infill like this is that you get some flexibility to have different types of architecture, different types of structures, different sizes. And so I'm encouraged by this because I do think we're going to see more people looking to do stuff in downtown. So I'm encouraged by just seeing the mix of different stuff that might be available to people to do. And I think it would be a big win for our downtown area.
Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I think one thing to kind of keep in mind with the conversation and where the conversation is going is to not get hung up on one specific project or one specific look and feel, and talk more about the kind of the opportunity and what would it look like? What does the process look like if somebody was to propose something that is different that we don't have right now? What are the things that need to be looked at? Is it a situation where we, as a community, want that to come before the Planning Commission and the City Council? Or is it something where we want to provide the opportunity for that to be a more administrative process? And then we put the guidelines around that to kind of help define.
Then we could start filling in blanks, which I could bring back to you, and you could go, yes, no, maybe so, too.
Mr. Johnson, it always scares me when you fill in the blanks. I never know where it's going to go. Councilmember Lovell? do you
Yeah,
have
so,
something?
so I like what you mentioned earlier was, and I think it would probably be good because you said you had some ideas of ways to structure this. I think bringing us something and then
Yeah.
us kind of having something to work with, because I do think like single-family home, then maybe the threshold is a fourplex that has a a different type of standard. I do like the overlay of downtown, and the only reason I say that because I am conscious of public input. Like, you don't want to, and it's hard to know this, you don't want to affect someone's property value by what you're putting in next to them. I think it's far less likely that you affect that in the downtown kind of urban infill area. But I also see some areas in Lee Summit that could stand to use, a lift and shift and, that aren't maybe part of the downtown overlay. So I think maybe some thresholds for type of product that's going in. And then you kind of bringing us some of your suggested ideas and maybe from your experience and what you've seen would be helpful as we navigate this.
Yeah, I wanted to just, let me be clear, I didn't want to just come to you first meeting off the bat and go, here's the policy, what do you think? I wanted to have this discussion, so.
Lift and shift. Did you write that down?
I did actually.
Pretty good.
Does it scale, lift and shift?
I expect you to use that in the next meeting, just somehow, some way.
Roger.
Okay, is that fair? Yes, Councilmember Shields.
I just want to say, mostly we've been talking about is residential, but this could apply to commercial too, right? Infill in commercial
Yeah,
areas.
so,
And is that
live
something that we
work?
should be talking about or considering? Not like putting a bunch of commercial into the middle of a residential neighborhood, but anywhere that we have gaps in commercial areas, do we want to make it easier to build new buildings, bring in new businesses, that kind of thing?
let me think about that a little bit. Yeah, I think, I don't want to open a can of worms, but the incentive policy, I think somewhat addresses this, but let me think about that. I think there's good opportunity maybe for live work in some of our transition areas in the downtown, and there could be gaps in those areas. In fact, I think there are. And I think that's a good opportunity for the city in general.
I don't have a whole list of policy prescriptions. I was just curious if was going to be part of this discussion, so.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. You know, I didn't realize this meeting was going to go this way. So
Item 2 will be far less.
that's your perception. I just want to say, are you all okay to stay till about 6:30? I think we, okay? Yeah, okay. All right, let's go to item 2.
Okay.
If you got everything you need, did you?
Yeah.
You think?
I
Okay,
think I've got enough to start crafting a policy and bringing that back, and then I think, yeah, we'll start narrowing this down. I only have 2 slides, and one of them is the title. Let me let me convey what we're trying to do here. Right now, we're in kind of I'll say a really fuzzy world right now with our minor plat process. We can't require public infrastructure with it right now. We need council authorization to do that. That's very clear in our ordinance. So with up to 3 lots being created, that's an opportunity that can have more impact on our public services. In a lot of the areas people are doing this, there are gaps in the sidewalk system. And so what this allows us to do is say, hey, put that sidewalk in, or deal with that stormwater issue, things like that, by being very explicit that the council is granting this authority to staff to require these public improvements. We also set up an appeal process because my attorney said we had to. And that would ultimately go through Planning Commission and City Council. So that's really what we're trying to do here. And with that, I'm open for discussion.
Councilmember Shields.
I just have questions.
No, that's fine.
So right now, with a minor plat, is the default we wouldn't require any kind of review of storm drainage, sidewalks? any
No,
of that
we
kind of
do.
stuff? Okay.
But if you get down to the nitty gritty, if somebody's attorney said, where does it say that you can require a sidewalk in front of this development? We wouldn't be able to say we could. Ultimately, what our attorney has determined is there is nothing in here that grants you that, and I don't remember the technical term, but without it going through a council hearing and ultimately council authorization, there needs to be an explicit statement in the ordinance that says, City Council hereby grants staff the ability to require public improvements.
So up until now, it's sort of been the practice, but we need to add it to the ordinance to make
Yes.
it official?
Yes.
Chair, it may be beneficial to have Mr. Bushek just give a quick rundown of kind of the analysis of how we ended up here.
I would appreciate that. That'd be great.
Sure, so I'll give a kind of a legal / planning and subdivision law overview of this. So the basic purpose for our subdivision regulations, and this is the primary purpose, is to make sure that there's adequate public services and facilities to serve the property before it's subdivided up. And the basic idea is we don't want to let a property owner come in and divide up a piece of property into lots of different lots and not have roads, water, sewer, stormwater improvements to serve the development. That's the basic purpose of our subdivision regulations. We also have in the subdivision regulations this minor platting process, which allows a parcel to be split up into up to 3 parcels through an administrative process, which is handled by staff. That's more efficient for the property owner. State law provides that the city council can require those public improvements and services to be provided as part of that subdivision process. Unless you delegate that authority to city staff can't do that on their own. So we've had many instances, not many, we've had a few instances recently where a minor plat has been requested and there are some public improvements that are needed to fill out the area. Complete a sidewalk, complete a street that stops before, stops too early and the street needs to be completed. The question has come to me, can we require the public improvements as part of that minor plat process? My answer is no. State law provides that the city council can require that, but city staff can't require that. And here's why. Simple example. I don't think this would ever happen in Lee Summit, but let's say you had a rogue staff member that said, I'll grant your minor plat, but you have to build me $1 million road. We can't have that happening. That's an extreme example. So the city council has the authority to require those public improvements, and that's inherent in the subdivision law that's allowed by state statute. So we came up with a sort of interim solution to get us to this point, which is we have two choices. You can go to the property owner and say, we'll approve your minor plat if you voluntarily agree to these public improvements that are needed to fill out this area. And if you don't like that, then we'll have to run you through the full platting process, preliminary plat and final plat, which is the full planning commission city council approval process. Because city staff doesn't have the authority to require public improvements at minor plat. I think we did that on a couple occasions successfully. Property owner agreed to it. To remedy that problem, this is the solution. The end result of this amendment is city council will be delegating to staff the authority to require public improvements through approval of a minor plat. And the safeguard mechanism and what makes it legal is if the property owner disagrees with that, they can appeal it up to you, the city council. So the city council retains the final approval authority, which matches up with that state law that I mentioned at the beginning, which is it's ultimately the city council that has the authority to require public improvements when approving a plat. So we've solved the issue. It allows the minor plat process to continue. It allows public improvements to be required when needed, and it gives relief to the property owner if they don't like the result.
All right, any questions for the attorney in the room? No? And I'm sorry if I missed it, Mr. Johnson, thank you. Is there a size requirement, like my lot? I think my lot's third of an acre, maybe a little less. Can I minor plat my lot?
I don't know, because I don't know what zone you're in.
Oh, okay.
Probably not. Our standard lot is, I believe, 80 feet wide by 100 or 120.
Okay,
So if you're at a third of an acre, I severely doubt you could divide it.
okay, so there is a size requirement. on
Yeah,
the
whatever
plat.
zone you're in, you have to meet the minimum size and width requirements, so.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Well, this is an ordinance.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything else to add, Mr. Johnson?
Nope.
This is an ordinance, so if you all are in favor of it, I need a motion to move it forward. Councilmember Shields.
Chair, I move to recommend to council for approval TMP 2594, an ordinance amending Chapter 33 Unified Development Ordinance of the Lee Summit Code of Ordinances, Article 7, subdivisions to allow for requirement of public infrastructure with the administrative approval of minor plats.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Shields and a second by Councilmember Pryor to move TMP-2594 to City Council for approval. Can I have a roll call, please, Julie?
Chair,
Councilmember-
if I may, one thing. This is a UDO amendment, and UDO amendments are slightly different. They have to go to the planning commission prior to going to city council. I don't think there's an issue with the motion or anything. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that this would go to planning commission. And then because of the way that we do our UDO process and the way it's written, it would go ahead and be second read. It would be first read and then second read after planning commission.
All right, thank you for that reminder. Roll call, Julie?
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor,
Aye.
Chair Edson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Shields.
Aye.
Now, on to ADUs. Oh, yes, Councilmember Pryor?
So it wouldn't change the fact that I was going to second that anyway, but I do have a question. How does staff determine what improvements are needed?
So the improvements that were needed would be based off of the engineering, design, and analysis associated with whatever the development was. A lot of times with the minor plat, it's pretty straightforward, and there's a sidewalk gap situation for more than anything else. Some of the other stuff, it may be the need for a sanitary sewer extension. So we haven't really ran into the issue where it's been a problem where somebody wasn't doing it to serve their project anyways. However, it was identified as something that we didn't want to be put into the position of having an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McGuire?
All right. Good evening, board members. Shannon McGuire, staff planner. So before you today is a discussion or an ordinance regarding the ADUs. So just a quick history, how did we get where we're at, or how did we get here today? In January of '22, Jennifer Thompson provided the CEDC with some ADU research. At that time, that research or that discussion was tabled. I was back before you in November of '22 and presented additional research, and additional conversation was held at that time. At that time, the CEDC did direct staff to present an ordinance for ADUs. Through that preparation, staff did conduct some public outreach through the use of a survey on social media. It was also emailed out to the HOAs that we have on file, or that we have an email address on file for, as well as shared through some of our community partners' social media and by word of mouth as well. That survey was open for roughly 21 days. We had pretty good response. We had 580 responses to that. I am told that's a great response, that we beat most of the PD's surveys that they do. So, ongoing, staff does continue to receive numerous calls throughout the business day and week from citizens requesting information and what are the regulations for ADUs. So, and then that brings me before you today, presenting the changes or the proposed ordinance for the ADUs. So, quick comprehensive plan in 2020 was adopted. It did identify 7 future plan elements. One of those was the strong neighborhood element and housing choice. So some of the goals outlined in that section were to identify some areas of the neighborhood, to connect the diversity of residents through the community, and provide affordable housing options for families and young professionals, hourly workers, and people of different generations, cultures, and backgrounds. So this ordinance really kind of meets those established goals. So again, we did conduct that survey. Like I said, there was 580 responses. Of those 580 responses, around a little over 97% were Lee Summit residents. Just a 2.76% or 16 total were non-residents. The ages ranged from less than 20 all the way up to 60 plus. It was a pretty good spread among those age ranges. Of the respondents, 95.5% owned their own home, and just 4.5% were renters. So there was some concerns brought up at one point after the survey was released with regards to some of the descriptions of what an ADU is. ADUs go by a lot of different names. Some mother-in-law suite, granny flats, Ohana units. Someone or a couple council members brought up a concern with whether we're not special or short-term rentals should be included in that description. So we did go ahead and amend that description and left that survey open for longer than we originally were going to. Before the description was amended, we had 418 responses in that time period. Only 5.5% of those responses said no ADUs. After the description was amended to include short-term rentals, we had 189 responses, which with only 13 saying no ADUs, that statistically there wasn't much of a difference. It was about 1.4% difference between prior to amending it than post-amending. So there was 18 total questions in that survey. I don't want to hit every single one, but I'll just kind of want to hit some high points on that survey. One of the questions was, should ADUs be allowed? As you can see here, this question really is, where should ADUs be allowed? There was 4 different categories: all districts, certain districts such as the downtown, large lot districts of half acre or greater, or nowhere. Overwhelmingly, 65% said should be allowed in all districts, with the next on being half acre or larger. So 39 respondents out of the 580 said should be allowed anywhere in the city. So that's only about 6.78% overall. One of the questions also was with regards to parking. Should off-street parking be required? And that was kind of laid out as, do you agree, disagree, or strongly agree? Nearly half said that they either agreed or agreed or strongly agreed that off-site parking should be required. 34% said they were kind of apathetic about it. So only 17% or so said either they disagreed or strongly disagreed that we should require off-street parking. Next question, or one of the other questions, was what's the maximum size to be allowed? We set it at 600, 720, 850, or no maximum. 218 people said no maximum. That was the highest category, down to the 600. It was the lowest at 86 respondents. Should the property owner live on the primary residence? Overwhelmingly, the public said yes, the property owner should be invested and live on site if there is an ADU. That was at 77%. 4% said other, and typically that was the respondent said no ADUs. So that's where we're going to get that other. There were, in your packet was included a red line of the ordinance changes. Kind of one of the, currently there are multiple categories of ADUs, or what would kind of fall under an ADU discussion, and they're located in different sections throughout the ordinance. So it's kind of confusing sometimes to go to one section, then you have to go to the other section. So the thought process behind the proposed changes is to consolidate that all under one, so it's easy to find, easy to interpret, and easy to enforce. As presented, staff has consolidated all those to promote that ease of use and understandability and promote consistency across the UDO. We did implement that is only allowed as accessory to a single-family home. So no ADUs at duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes, or any kind of multifamily. So it does must meet the setbacks as established through there. So the district setbacks on the side yard. So again, consistency across the board in the standards. 20-foot rear setback, and if it is an attached ADU, it must have a 6-foot recess setback from the principal structure to give kind of some depth and undulation there. Size limitation, while the respondents said no size limitation was the greatest factor, one of the other big concerns that were brought up by some citizens or the respondents to was compatibility with the existing neighborhood and existing principal structure. So we established a method to kind of keep that compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and primarily the principal structure. We don't want to overpower the principal structure, so we set it at 1,000 square feet or 50% of the gross floor area of the principal structure, whichever is smaller. So that it would ensure that an ADU would be subordinate and accessory to the primary structure and not kind of overtake and overpower what's already there. We also set the limit lot coverage at 60%. The reason we came up with 60%, that is the existing lot coverage requirement in the UDO for residential property. So again, consistency across the board. The ADU is not allowed to be any taller than the principal structure. Again, trying to fit in with the existing neighborhood. And only one ADU would be allowed per lot. Must meet all current codes, including fire, building, and property maintenance codes. Again, required one off-street parking. One of the big comments we did get was short-term rentals. So we went ahead and put a language in there that kind of deals with that, and I'll go into more depth of that here later. Again, the owner must occupy the property, and both of the dwellings, the ADU and the principal structure, must remain under the same ownership. So no condoing out or selling off the property. So again, received multiple public comments. Just want to hit on some of the more common ones and the more popular ones that we did it. ADUs will only be used as short-term rentals. So what we did here to address that concern is we're actually, if you notice in your packet, I've amended or proposed amendments to two different ordinances in the UDO, the one that deals with accessory permitted uses in the residential districts, as well as amending to the short-term rental unit or short-term rentals ordinance. So in both of those, in the accessory structure ordinance, it basically says short-term rentals shall not be located in an ADU. Pretty plain and clear. In the short-term rental ordinance, I went ahead and was a little bit more broad and specific at the same time by saying no short-term rentals shall be located in an accessory dwelling unit or any accessory structure. So that's going to keep short-term rentals out of any garages, chicken coops, anything else they try to put one in. So, again, back to the parking, we did receive quite a few parking and an overwhelming response that we should require parking. So that was put in there as well to require at least one off-street parking. A lot of comments with regards to compatibility issues with existing neighborhoods. So we did spend a lot of time kind of going over that. ADUs must meet the zoning, the existing zoning setbacks for side yards. Architectural styles shall be compatible with the existing neighborhood. ADUs shall also be compatible with the height, bulk, and site location of the principal structure. So to really kind of keep that character in check and in line, so we're not getting something that's just out of place. We also went as far as to require some compatible materials, architectural styles, incorporating the same materials, colors, and design motif as the principal structure as well. And again, only one ADU per lot. So on this one, there were some comments with regards to it's just going to be a bunch of absentee landlords and outside investors coming in and ruining the character of the neighborhood, not having to be invested in the neighborhood and in the culture of the neighborhood. So three things kind of address that. Primarily, again, ownership has to be on site. There's a couple different categories or provisions here that address that. And again, the primary and accessory dwellings shall remain under the same ownership. So. And then one, again, loss of green space, increased impervious surface. So that's where we kind of addressed that with the 60% lot coverage. Again, that lot coverage is already established in the UDO. That's what someone currently now could do in a single family home. So again, consistency across the board. There is one item that I wanted to kind of point out that's not really related to ADU, but is a cleanup item in the first portion of the ordinance. This has to do with accessory structures and their relationship to a principal structure. Currently, if an accessory structure, shed, detached garage, or anything like that is within 10 feet of the principal structure, the main house, then principal structure setbacks would apply. We run into a situation with that with swimming pools. We can run into a situation where a swimming pool is proposed at 10 feet from the house, and that means they would have a 10-foot rear yard setback. But if that swimming pool needs to shift closer to the house due to utility easements, buried cables or for some reason, if it gets less than 10 feet to that house, then a 30-foot rear setback would apply. So this is just kind of like a cleanup that where it doesn't really make sense to apply that 30-foot setback if it's closer to the house, because if we would allow a 10-foot setback. So staff, since we were already in there making amendments, we went ahead and threw that in there. So it's kind of just a cleanup item. So with that, I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. And for the committee, I just want to say that, so this is what staff has drafted up, but we can comment and change and rework and have staff bring it back if we need to for another meeting. So I didn't want anybody to feel like this is what you're voting on, you can't change it. Yeah, this is really starting for a discussion, correct? Mr. Elam?
Yeah, that's up to you as the committee. You can make any changes you want. And we can take that back and redraft and come back. But we did want to provide kind of the ordinance as we see it, meeting the requirements of everything that we've heard through the feedback and the discussions that we've had with the committee.
Okay, thank you. And now I'll open it up for discussion. Councilmember Shields.
Thank you, Chair. So I like that we're looking at this. I think it's a really great opportunity for the city. I feel like there should be a little bit less restrictions in terms of occupancy, like the short-term rentals and the owner occupancy provisions. I think if you want to be able to do this, and part of it is to give the owner an opportunity to increase the value of their home or maybe defray expenses of their home, being able to do like putting one of these in and then occasionally Airbnb-ing it to bring in a little bit of extra income, I think that's could be beneficial to owners. And then the owner occupancy, if at some point you want to move out and rent your home again as an income stream, I don't think that should be a problem. I mean, you can rent out single-family homes and lease them, can't you? Like, there's nothing.
Correct, and
Yeah.
those two provisions were put in there in direct response to the survey results.
I understand, but I'm just thinking about how we run our city right now. Like, if you can move out of your house and rent it out, why can't you move out of your house and rent out both sections of it? I don't see why this should be treated differently than we treat any other residential structure in the city. And as far as the short-term rentals, where we do allow them, right now we require the owner to either live on or next to the property, and this seems like a really easy way to comply with that, that if, build out your own loft over the garage or whatever, you're on site, you're supervising it, why not be able to use that for a short, and again, I understand that was part of the survey results, but we're always balancing the owner's property rights, ability to be flexible with their own property versus maybe what a neighbor next door wants, and I feel like, to me, this feels like it strikes the balance too far away from an owner being able to have some flexibility and really make use of this. And then say you build one of these for your mother-in-law, maybe 10 years down the line she passes, or maybe you decide to sell the property later. The next owner, it would be great if they had some flexibility on what they could do with this improvement. So I feel like it's maybe would impede the long-term functionality of something like this and that investment that somebody's spending to improve their property if we really limit the way they can use it like this.
Thank you. Councilmember Pryor.
So I actually really like what you guys have added, but I will say, as far as Airbnbs, we can look to Kansas City and look at all of the issues they've had and look at their mayor and the press conferences he's done, the stuff that was on their last ballot here in April, and we can see that Airbnbs are not a fantastic idea for our city. He has complained about the increased litter, increased on-street parking, and the list goes on and on. I think anyone can pull up. He's done several press conferences about it. So I do think that Airbnbs, I agree with the survey results on that they're, I don't think, going to be beneficial to our city. But I do like a lot of what you guys have added. Thank you.
Councilmember Lovell.
Would HOAs overrule this if there was policy inside the HOA that prohibited this type of activity, like an ADU?
Yeah, an HOA can make their own rules, so nothing in this ordinance would compel an HOA to allow this. So if an HOA wanted to establish their own rules to prohibit it, they could. I always kind of describe that as they can add to our ordinances, but they cannot take away. So they can say, be more restrictive and say none. Just an example would be like a fence, right? The city policy would allow a 6-foot fence, but an HOA can come in and say, we only want 4-foot fences. So the same thing here, where we say they're allowed with these conditions, they can come and say, well, no, we don't want them in our subdivision. So they still have that ability.
I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, so let me, we'll probably have more as we go. So what is an RDR zoning?
RDR is rural density residential, so it's one of our larger lot rural districts. So it's going to be that 0.5 or 1 acre size and limitation.
Okay, so, and RLL is residential large lot?
Correct.
So how big is that?
One's a half acre and one's a 1 acre.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, and we don't deal with them very often because there's very few in the city, so it's going to be the larger lots.
Okay, so my question for the committee is, are you comfortable with ADUs being allowed in all the zoning districts? Or do you want to restrict them to a couple of zoning districts? Or do you want to break it up so you have, like the detached ADUs allowed on larger lot districts, but allow ADUs in basements and garages that are attached in like R1, R2? That's my question for the committee. I know where you're going to go, but Councilmember Shields. Oh, sure. No, it's okay.
I feel like to some extent that concern's already addressed how the ordinance is currently written, because you have limits on the total occupied space. The 60% lot coverage is a limit, and complying with the current zoning setbacks is a limit. So I can understand that there'd be concern, but we already have kind of set up what the footprint is that you can have a structure on one of those lots anyway, and we're limiting how much coverage you can have. So I feel like, to me, that would address the concern of just how dense these are getting in certain districts.
Staff? Mr. McGuire?
I would agree with that.
Would
You
you?
know,
Okay.
a good example would be recently the Nightingale Meadows preliminary development plan that you guys just recently applied or approved. So if this policy would have been in place at that time, they would not have had gone through that arduous preliminary development plan to get that approved. That this would have allowed that with a little bit more ease, and the setback still would have applied, and we would have been able to address that through the zoning code.
Okay, yeah. Councilmember Pryor?
Do we know what ADUs do to property values, like surrounding property values? Do we know it all?
That wasn't a part, or I didn't come across anything in research of adjacent property values. I know the property values that they're on would increase the property value, increase the taxable rate on that particular property value as well.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and then can you go back to the slide that shows all of the different like all of the different,
Oh, the different types.
yeah, I just wanted to see that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good slide. Councilmember Lovell, you're being shockingly quiet.
Well, let me change that. So like garage conversion, that kind of worries me.
So there is a stipulation in there that says if you're going to convert a garage, you have to meet the required indoor parking requirements, so elsewhere on site. So if you're going to convert your garage, you have to provide 2 indoor parking stalls to meet the underlying zoning code. So it's not eliminated in the garage. Say you have a garage and say a detached garage as well. As long as you can meet the required 2, you can convert one of those garages.
Okay. I don't know. I think whenever we are faced with something like this, you have to think of the unintended outcomes. And I think that's very hard to quantify or think about. This is taking something we don't have policy for and just going across the whole city. I would be more in favor of, I think a perfect example was like Nightingale or whatever, where they did the mother-in-law was running in there. I think, well, that's a reasonable request. It looks great, fits in downtown, it's for that use. But are there nefarious ways that are things that the ways this can be used that have a negative effect or impact on our city as a whole? And I think that's where, when we're making decisions like this, like you have to really try and see out to what could happen. Like, in a suburb where you've got multiple families living in, and what that causes and how that impacts. Maybe the HOA prohibits it, maybe it doesn't. I would be more in favor of saying we're dipping our toe in this and throwing like an overlay over downtown. But I would think anything outside of that, especially neighborhoods, because the problem is like a lot of these HOAs were created before this stuff was even popular, right? So it's doubtful that they have anything in there that would allow them to maintain control or the integrity of that neighborhood that they have. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't know. I'd be more apt to it for like a downtown overlay and see how it goes. versus just, not that you guys are just, it's free range to do whatever, but again, it's just, just trying to think it through. So that's kind of where I am right now, Chair. Thanks.
Do you have something to add?
I would also point out that New Longview does allow these in a lot of their stuff too. So if you were to limit it to just downtown, that may cause some confusion within that area as well.
Yeah, so like New Longview, obviously they're approved within our HOA and usually built above garages, structures or whatever. So how would this policy, I mean, we've been able to do that now, and it's part of our HOA.
Right, that was approved through their PDP. I'm just saying that.
Right.
I'm trying to point out that it could cause confusing that where it's allowed in certain areas of the city and maybe not others if we don't clearly define that.
I think I guess it's like if the original intent was to build a new urbanism development that allowed accessory dwelling and was built into the architecture and what people expected when they moved in there, that you knew that when you moved in there. What I want to avoid is I moved in somewhere and now we've changed some policy that drastically affects my quality of life, my property values, whatever that might be. And again, I don't know that it would. I'm just saying I think these are things that we have to think about, what kind of impact this has on our community.
So I think we have a couple options there. One is we say, hey, it's just allowed in the downtown activity center as shown in the Ignite Comprehensive Plan, which is Chipman, Highway 50, 291, in that kind of triangle, if that's the way you're going. Another option would be to delay the effective date on this for 3 or 6 months and let HOAs have time to have those votes, have those discussions. I will say that we did try to contact HOAs when we sent this survey out. Just a couple of options I'll throw out there. Thank you.
Councilmember Pryor, I see, did you have a question or comment?
I can. So this eliminates public input, doesn't it? So does it completely eliminate public input if your neighbor decides to do an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard?
There is currently not a mechanism in there that would require that public input. Some of the guidance that we received or staff received from, or some of the guidance that I kind of took from you guys last time I was here was to try and remove some of those hurdles to allow this. Again, going back to the Nightingale Meadows, for them to get that approved, it went through public hearing at both the Planning Commission and City Council. They were probably $10,000 in just to get that before you. So that's a huge hurdle. So right now, it would follow the same process as if you just want to build, just a detached garage, where you can build a detached garage and size is going to be limited based on your square footage of your lot. So there's no public input on that. Pool house or hobby shop or any of those other accepted accessory structures. So it really, again, consistency, following the same input or the same processes as other uses as well. So currently, no, there's no public input or public process on this.
Okay, I'm just thinking through things. So I know I was looking it up and seeing how some cities did it in other areas, and there are some cities that do it. You can do an ADU, you have to have 60% of neighbor approval to do it. So I mean, there are different, if we're gonna completely eliminate coming before council, there are different ways to still get public input. I don't know, again, I don't know what's the right way to do it, but I don't know.
Okay. Let's go back a little bit. Okay, so straw poll. Committee members, who wants to blanket ADUs, allow them all across the city as presented in the ordinance? Okay. It's okay. Well, and I think Councilmember Lovell's comments are fair. This has been a very conservative town on development, and we kind of take baby steps, and we may get to where you want to get, but sometimes we take baby steps to get there, you know? What if we do an overlay downtown, but also allow on larger lots, on RDL and RLL? Yeah, Councilmember Pryor?
So I think I like where you're going with this. One of my big concerns is, I know when the apartments were going in, a lot of people were concerned about the sewer lines downtown and them not being able to handle. I mean, at what point are we overloading the infrastructure downtown and need to address it?
So the addition of a single, I'll say a single dwelling unit, kind of like we're talking about, really wouldn't have an impact on there. The bigger impact in the downtown area, that was the bigger concern, was the I&I that we've got in the area, the inflow and infiltration associated with it. And there's been several things done to help mitigate that throughout the time. But for example, the design criteria that is utilized for a 2-bedroom home versus a 5-bedroom home is generally the same design criteria. So now they're different when you go from, one home to 300 homes. That's a difference there. But generally, with the way that the sanitary sewer lines are at, and I believe we've even communicated with the water utilities on this, that the addition of ADUs are not going to have a significant impact on the capacity.
Okay, what about stormwater? What kind of mitigation efforts would be for ADUs as far as stormwater goes?
So currently, the 60% impervious coverage limit that is there, you could go put a driveway in, you could go put a patio in. You can put a patio in right now with no requirement or anything like that. The control or the limit on that is the 60% impervious coverage limit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Breyer. So back to my previous questions. If we allow ADUs, do you want a blanket? Do you want downtown? Do you want large lots? Where are you comfortable allowing them?
I mean, where am I comfortable? Nowhere, but I know that I need to compromise. So, I don't know, are we screwing people downtown if we say that that we're gonna do ADUs here and not everyone wants them? I don't know what the right answer is, but I think downtown makes more sense than a neighborhood that, I don't know. I'd say probably downtown and then anything like 1 acre lots.
Okay.
But
Well, New Longview already allows them, and that was done through the PDP process, right? So that's a done deal. And we can allow them with new projects as they come through, like New Longview and Arbor Walk, through the PDP process. Okay, yeah, Councilmember?
Sorry, I just wanted to say, Shannon, I think you mentioned that you thought it could create some confusion for the places that have it.
Potentially
So
could create some confusion.
is there some kind of way that you could modify the language to say that, or is allowed by a PDP or something like that, just so that no one thinks that suddenly they're prohibited in places where?
Yeah, we could absolutely add that, and that's an easy one-sentence add.
Thank you, great comment. And also, let's talk about Airbnbs. So Airbnbs are already allowed. What about allowing the ADUs where they're already allowed?
I would be a firm no on
Councilmember
that.
Pryor's a firm no. Councilmember Lovell?
I'm not a firm no, and I'm not a firm yes on that, because I think, I can see the positive of that, like people wanting to come visit Lee Summit and stay in an Airbnb downtown and.
Well, if we're already allowing them downtown, we already allow them.
We are already allowing
But
them
you're just
downtown.
saying it would be a restriction on the AD, if it was an ADU.
Correct. So
Right.
as presented today, it would only restrict them in ADUs. You could still Airbnb your principal structure, or if you don't have an ADU, you can still ADU.
I would-
Correct.
Short-term rental your principal structure.
I wouldn't be opposed to allowing that in the district that's downtown, especially with the requirement that the property owner live in the primary residence.
Okay.
Right? It could not rent out the primary residence
not-
and the ADU,
Correct. One of them has to be occupied by the owner.
right?
Councilmember Pryor, you may
Because I
lose this one.
I love the idea
I
of
don't know.
someone being able to, supplement income or find a way to do that. I think that's the perfect use of it. I just always think is like, how does it, if there's a way that someone takes advantage of that and it ends up being negative, but.
So just for a little clarification, a short-term rental is considered anything that rents for 30 days or less. So nothing in here stops you from renting it for a traditional 30-day or more term
Well,
lease.
yeah, and, you know, we may vet all this out and it goes to council and council totally changes it. So, you know, there's that. Councilmember Pryor.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences with allowing ADUs, even ADUs to be Airbnbs, even in the areas that we already allow Airbnbs. And I feel like it's going to completely change the charm of what we love about downtown right now. So that's something, I feel like for me not wanting ADUs, really anything under 1 acre lots, I'm willing to compromise, but that's one thing that I'm not willing to compromise on.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Where are you on that? You're okay with that? The ADUs you just said?
I'm okay with what Councilmember Pryor said, or am I?
No, you're okay with the ADUs downtown? In the short-term rentals, sorry. My brain's frying out.
And then me too. I'm okay with the ADUs. Just
Airbnbs.
in kind of a defined district downtown.
And using them as Airbnbs? Yes, no?
I don't know, maybe that's something we could look at later. I don't know. I mean, being conscious, I mean, it's not an easy answer, and I hear what Councilmember Pryor says. She lives down here. You know, again, like, I see the positive, I see the good uses of it. I
Okay.
just think it's hard for me to say one way or the other. I'm sure it would get flushed out at city council, and, you know, when this came before us to talk about that, so, you know, maybe that's something that could be attached to this policy that we can either add or not add.
Okay, so, yeah, Councilmember Pryor.
Well, I feel like, okay, so if we're going to even consider Airbnbs being in the district in downtown that they're already allowed, the Airbnbs for the ADUs, then we need to completely wipe the parking requirements, because now we're going to be looking at a lot of people staying in Airbnbs like they do. I mean, we can look at other cities and see that that's what happens. Even with people currently living in that home, it's inevitable. That's what's going to happen. And so we need to completely we need to completely wipe the parking requirement and up the off-street parking requirement, because now everyone's going to be parking on the street that's staying in the Airbnbs, the ADU Airbnbs. So, yeah, I don't think that this was necessarily written to incorporate Airbnbs, and now that we're considering doing Airbnbs, that makes me think differently about the whole thing.
So I guess in that line of thought, we could set that parking requirement to the same as an apartment, right? Which would require 1.5 stalls or 2 stalls per unit. Because this, as proposed, does limit the bedroom count to 2 bedrooms or less. So an apartment would require 1.5 stalls, a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom apartment would require 1.5 stalls plus a half a stall for guest parking, so essentially 2 per 2-bedroom unit.
Yeah.
So
And
if you wanted to-
Airbnbs just tuck beds in everywhere to get as many people to stay there as they can. So there's going to be a lot of people staying in Airbnbs.
Okay, Mr. Elam, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of remind process a little bit, since this is a UDO amendment. So there is the process here with the CEDC where we work through the language and everything of that. But then there are public hearings associated with this as well. So there's public hearings before both the Planning Commission and the City Council. Now, the only difference is, I'll say, is kind of the notification. There's no mailing notification that we can really do for the public hearings associated with this, but it is published in the paper per state statute on there.
All right, thank you. And so, Councilmember Pryor, so the way it's written now, short-term rentals aren't allowed, but it just occurred to me, we do allow short-term rentals downtown, right? So what if I live downtown, I build an ADU, I'm the primary landowner, so I go live in the ADU and then rent out my house as a short-term rental? That's totally allowed the way we have it now, correct?
However, short-term rentals are limited to 2 bedrooms
Okay.
right
So
now,
if-
so.
I've made my 3-bedroom house into a 2-bedroom house because the 3rd bedroom is now an office.
Office, yes.
Yeah. I'm just saying that people who want to get around things, so.
And we've had that short-term rental ordinance since 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling there's probably a lot of stealth people operating those.
Okay.
And I think we've only gotten, I'm guessing here, so less than 5 complaints a year on those. So I'm not sure that we've had like kind of an Armageddon situation yet. What's that?
World Cup.
Yeah,
Buckle up.
good point.
Yeah.
But then those people are gonna be going to all our businesses and things, so that's kind of nice.
Okay, let me suggest this because this committee likes to talk, which is great. And it's 6:40 and I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So let's bring this back for one more meeting. Let's limit the zoning. So do an overlay downtown, large lots, RDR, whatever that is. We will continue to discuss the short-term rentals at the next meeting. So if you all want to reach out to people, reach out to other council members, ask them what they think, and we'll come to some sort of agreement at that meeting, and then it will go to, we'll have public hearings on it. Is that good? And if the public hearings, everybody says we want this everywhere, then we'll come back and regroup. If they come back and say absolutely not, then we'll come back and regroup. Fair?
One clarification, limiting it to large lots, are you saying limited to 1 acre and higher, which would be RDR and ag, or limited to RLL, RDR and ag, which would be a ½ acre, 1 acre, and 10 acre lots?
Anybody have any preference over half and 1 acre? Let's go with, half. Half and up. How's that?
And that would just encompass all those kind of rural zoning
Yeah.
districts, so, okay.
Yeah. And that way, if you all change your minds between then and the next meeting, well, that happens too. Okay, so that is, we don't need to move that. Don't we have something else? No? I thought we had a third ordinance. No? I don't see a third one.
Add one?
I do not. So Shannon, are you good?
I'm good if you're
Mr.
good.
McGuire, I'm sorry. All right, good job. Roundtable. Anybody have anything?
Just real quick, I just appreciate the discourse and the conversation and trying to think. I mean, we all kind of come from different perspectives, but I do appreciate how we try to flesh it out and talk it through, and certainly appreciate staff's help and kind of guiding us through this and giving us valuable input too. So that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Anybody else? I do too. Yeah, Councilmember Pryor.
I agree, thank you. And thanks for all the work that you put into the survey and to putting everything in front of us.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's comments all the time. So you all are great. Staff roundtable?
Yes, again, I will say thank you to everybody for the dialogue and the discussion and the direction as well. It's very helpful. These are the conversations, these are big decisions that need to be thought out and thought through, which is why we kind of we were just talking about our UDO amendment process, and that process is pretty onerous, going through CEDC, going through Planning Commission, going through City Council. No other ordinances go through that much kind of review and discussion, but it's for a purpose, because they have major long-term impacts on the community overall. So again, thank you for that. Now, shifting gears a little bit for a preview for next month's CEDC meeting. So next month's CEDC meeting, we currently only had the incentive policy discussion on there. So as part of that conversation, we're going to bring back our notes from the September discussion that we had. And we had a bit of a list of things that we're going to kind of run through. Some of those was rehab for shopping centers and the use of blighted CIDs. We're pulling together the information still that was requested on attainable housing. So we may or may not have that information to help interject the conversation. But we should have that. We're planning on having that, to have that as part of this conversation associated with incentives generally as well as some draft industrial policy statements, and basically a presentation of the data of where we've been with residential, industrial, and commercial incentives, kind of in the format that Mr. Bushek has kind of been putting together for everybody. So expecting, kind of anticipating a pretty robust conversation for this topic. So
I can't imagine that,
Yeah.
not with this committee. I can't imagine.
I may suggest, we could start earlier, or look at the starting time for the meeting if we're going to have a lengthy discussion.
Okay.
That's not going to hurt staff's feelings.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll send out an email and see what we can do. Okay,
AM to 8 or something.
okay. And when is the Douglas Street meeting, the public meeting? It's April 19th. What time? I think.
Yes, April 19th. Give me just 1 second on the time. I don't know the time.
Okay, I think it's 5:30, but I'll see if I can find the calendar. Okay. Anything else from staff?
Your input.
Thank you all. Thank you. We appreciate you all very much. All right, this meeting is adjourned.